Yo, Big Kish back up in here. We about to go over the hometown effect, Kendrick Lamar and Drake. The hometown effect, man. So, Rap Lore. Give a shout out to Rap Lore. Y'all go subscribe to Rap Lore. He put together something beautiful, y'all. And we about to get into it. You know what I'm saying? I don't like holding y'all. Without further ado, let's get it.
The battle between Kendrick Lamar and Drake is about two very different
I didn't watch this neither, so that's why I couldn't give y'all no proper introduction. But let's go.
cities and how they shaped them.
Drake is Starbucks and Kendrick Lamar is your local cafe. And it makes so much sense.
Both Kendrick and Drake are infamous for repping their respective hometowns. Kendrick has long been crowned Compton's favorite son, while Drake claims the title of Toronto's sixth god. And from the very start, both cities were at the epicenter of the biggest beef in hip-hop history. We already know what makes these artists different from one another, but what happens when we break down what makes Kendrick Lamar's Compton so different from Drake's Toronto? And how did these cities mold these superstars into what they are today? How did these radically different environments influence each rapper's voice and artistry? How have street politics, from the gang warfare in Compton to organized crime groups in Toronto, played into their surroundings? And what kind of influence did each city have on both?
Oh, snap. Toronto right here? I thought Toronto was up here some damn where. I'm bugging. Damn, I gotta learn my stuff, man.
Kendrick Lamar and Drake when it comes to their lives and their music. We're gonna go way beyond the music and investigate what makes each of these cities so distinct from one another. And let me tell you, the differences between Compton and Toronto are staggering. And most importantly, how did each city react to being dragged into a rap battle between their most famous artists? We've already talked about how since beefing with Kendrick might have burned Drake's ability to come back to LA. So the question becomes, is Kendrick gonna get that same frosty welcome when he pulls up in Toronto?
All right, so I'm out here on the streets.
Hey, yo, y'all write in the comments. Is Drake allowed to come to LA? I know my second most watched viewers are from California. Is Drake allowed to come to LA, y'all?
Of downtown Toronto.
Kendrick or Drake?
Kendrick.
Oh, okay.
Hard Kendrick.
How come?
I think the allegations against Drake are kind of sus.
The histories of Compton, California and Toronto, Canada could not have been more different. Compton's history is full of racial strife. It originally began as a farming community surrounded by the greater city of LA. A large number of those farmers were actually Japanese American, especially after the 1920s. But all that changed when World War II broke out because Japanese citizens were forced to give up their property and live in internment camps. Black Americans, many of them who were fleeing the Jim Crow South, moved into Compton. The city was supposed to represent a new American dream where Black Americans could have their own slice of suburbia and middle-class life. But Compton was far from paradise. Housing segregation limited where Black families could live, and the LAPD faced widespread accusations of police brutality. Some of the police abuse that was prevalent at the time was fictionalized in the movie LA Confidential. In 1965, these racial tensions reached a boiling point with the Watts riots. Marquette Fly, a Black motorist, was beaten by white officers, triggering 6 days of civil unrest that would change Compton forever. In the aftermath of the riots, white families fled the city in masses. Compton became known as a predominantly Black city where culture thrived, even while citizens suffered from police surveillance and violence. Toronto, meanwhile, has always had a history rooted in colonization and immigration. The land was originally occupied by Canada's Indigenous people until the government of Canada had them surrender their land. Waves of European immigrants.
The indigenous people they was indigenous to Compton too. They was indigenous. It was the Chinese people ain't start up in Compton. I just wanted to get that straight. The America's been here before. Listen, man, there's people been over here before they said whoever discovered it. Whoever they tell y'all who discovered it.
Flocked to Toronto throughout the late 1800s. As time went on, Toronto went on to attract people from Jamaica, India, China, and the Philippines. Toronto earned a reputation as a multicultural melting pot. In fact, 47% of its population comes from other countries. When you crunch the numbers, differences between Toronto and Compton only become starker. Compton is also a relatively small city. At only 6.3 miles, it's roughly double the size of New York City's Central Park and home to about 90,000 people. Toronto, on the other hand, is a major city with a population of over 3 million. And while Compton used to be known as a middle-class suburb, it eventually became one of the most impoverished and dangerous cities in all of America. 1 in 4 people in Compton live below the poverty line, and while in Toronto it has a similar rate at 28%, its huge size underlines just how different of an environment that it is. So to break it down, Compton is a tight-knit, historically black city connected to the greater city of LA, while Toronto is a sprawling metropolis that houses a bunch of different cultures. Along with that, street politics and crime shaped each city in very different ways.
Why are you guys Bloods? Why are you in the gang?
I guess because the area we grew up in, man.
Street politics have always had a huge influence on hip-hop, and Compton has had a notorious reputation for being one of the most dangerous cities in America. In the 1970s, gang warfare became rampant. The Crips and the Bloods were two rival sets that dominated Southern California, and their influence and power only grew when the crack epidemic hit America in the early 1980s. In the decades since, the war between the Crips and the Bloods have splintered into a number of rival sets which control territory throughout Compton. They include the Nutty Block Crips, the Santa Block Crips, the West Side Pyrus, the Cedar Block Pyrus, and the Fruittown Pyrus. Compton's very name became associated with gang warfare. Its crime rate is a whopping 279% higher than the national average. On the other hand, Toronto has a reputation for being one of the safest cities in North America. In 2024, it was actually ranked as the 6th safest city in the world. While crime and gun violence definitely exist in the city, it's at a drastically lower rate than Compton. Don't get me wrong, organized criminal groups operate in Toronto, but they tend to be more ethnically diverse, reflecting Toronto's
Tell them come to America to imitate America. They can't imitate this violence. I forgot how the lyrics go, but yeah, y'all know what I'm talking about.
Cultural population.
Oh, tell them go to America to imitate heritage, but they can't imitate this violence.
Police in the greater Toronto area has cited the presence of multinational crime groups like the Italian Mafia, the Hells Angels, or the Chinese Triads as being active in the city. But these organizations are known for having a much more subtle presence than the traditional street gangs. Compton residents have long talked about how their movements were restricted by gang affiliations in the city, where you might not be able to move from block to block without being confronted by rival sets. In Toronto, meanwhile, the average civilian is likely to have minimal interaction with a potential gang member. So while organized crime exists in Toronto, it's never been on the scale of violence that Compton has seen for decades. And when it comes to hip-hop, one city has a rich history of rap legends, and the other doesn't.
The craziest part about this revolution that we started is this album, Straight Outta Compton, was only done in 6 weeks.
When NWA burst on the scene with their 1988 debut album, Straight Outta Compton, they made the city of Compton damn near synonymous with gangster rap.
Police coming straight from the underground. A young got it bad 'cause I'm brown.
From the very beginning, NWA made headlines for tackling controversial subject matter, from police brutality to gang violence on the streets of LA. Straight Outta Compton was the first gangster rap album to go platinum and turned the city of Compton into a household name. NWA also introduced the world to Eazy-E, Ice Cube, and Dr. Dre, and all three rappers would go on to become hip-hop superstars. After NWA broke up, these artists continued to push their influence on hip-hop. Dr. Dre was credited for pioneering the G-Funk sound with his debut album The Chronic by sampling psychedelic funk, while Ice Cube became famous for using his music to express raw social commentary. NWA built a legacy that other Compton artists have continued to build on. DJ Quick, The Game, YG, Roddy Ricch, and Kendrick Lamar are some of the city's most popular artists who continue to push gangster rap into new directions. Compton hip-hop is famous for reckoning with the city's decades-long gang culture in a way that's realistic and personal. Toronto, meanwhile, built a hip-hop sound that pays homage to the city's international roots, especially by incorporating dancehall influences. The city's first breakout hip-hop superstar was Cardinal Offishaw, who set himself apart by paying homage to Toronto's vibrant Caribbean culture. By incorporating both dancehall and reggae into his music, Offishaw was celebrated as Canada's hip-hop ambassador. Cardinal's biggest moment came in 2008 with his fourth album.
I thought it was Cardinal Official. Is Cardinal Offishaw? I never heard that.
Not For Sale. His collaboration with Akon, Dangerous, peaked at number 5 on the Hot 100 and became his most successful single of all time. But while Cardinal had his fair share of success, Toronto's hip-hop scene wasn't globally acknowledged till Drake's success in the late 2000s. Since Drake's rise, the Toronto sound has been synonymous with dark, moody, and personal lyrics that mix rapping with singing. Artists like The Weeknd, Party Next Door, and Tory Lanez began to achieve major success on a global scale, while Drake's label OVO Sound was largely credited with helping put the spotlight on the city. While Compton's gangster rap legacy dates back nearly 4 decades, Toronto's influence on hip-hop is much more recent and much more eclectic too. Both Compton and Toronto shaped Kendrick and Drake's artistry in radically different ways.
It's the same thing when you listen to a Drake album. You kind of know what's coming up next. But a local cafe, that's Kendrick Lamar.
Kendrick Lamar was born and raised in Compton. His parents moved there from the south side of Chicago, and his father, Kenny, was formerly affiliated with the Gangster Disciples. Kendrick grew up in Section 8 housing, and while he avoided any gang affiliations, he had many close friends who were West Side Pyrus, a blood set based in the city. Kendrick's entire discography can be tied back to his Compton origins. He rapped extensively not only about the city's gang violence, but also about how growing up in Compton affected not only himself, but his family members. On Mad City, Kendrick raps about his cousin being murdered, and on The Art of Peer Pressure, he documents robberies he committed with his friends while fleeing from the police.
Pull in front of the house that we've been camping out for like 2 months. The sun is going down as we take whatever we want.
Most of Kendrick's music focuses on the push and pull of him trying to overcome the influences of his hometown. Kendrick has achieved acclaim for rapping about the nuances of being black in America, tying his lyrics back to Compton's complicated history of racial tension, redlining, gang culture, and the black middle class. In his interviews and his lyrics, Kendrick has spoken extensively about how growing up in Compton shaped his life and outlook on the world. He's even talked about how he used his music to tell the stories of his loved ones who are no longer alive. And like Kendrick, Drake was born and raised in his city, but under drastically different circumstances. He grew up in Toronto's affluent Forest Hills neighborhood and achieved popularity as a teen actor on the soap opera Degrassi.
You stay away from my girl.
But while Drake always claimed Toronto, he has long-standing ties to America. When Drake's parents divorced when he was 5 years old, his father, Dennis Graham, moved back to his hometown, Memphis, Tennessee. Drake has talked about how visiting his dad in Memphis inspired not only him, but also his music. When it comes to Toronto, Drake has faithfully repped the city and is credited with popularizing the city's nickname, the Six. Like Cardinal Offishaw before him, Drake has achieved enormous success by mashing up hip-hop with other genre influences, representing Toronto's famously diverse soundscape. But this has also led to a ton of blowback. Drake has become well known for utilizing dancehall and Afrobeats in his music, and for sometimes singing in Jamaican or UK accents. Other artists and critics have claimed that Drake is appropriating other genres and not being true to his own upbringing. Mavado, a well-known dancehall artist from Jamaica, dissed Drake by claiming that Drake wants to be seen as Jamaican when he really isn't. One of Drake's most successful songs, Hotline Bling, was originally released as a remix for the song Cha Cha by Dram, but once Hotline Bling took off in popularity, Drake was accused of completely ripping the song from the original artist. On the other hand, Drake has claimed that Toronto's history as a cultural melting pot led him to growing up around many different cultures and music. While Kendrick is widely celebrated for being authentic to his Compton roots, Drake has been long criticized for not being authentic to himself. But when the beef was on, how did each city respond to being dragged into one of the biggest rap battles of all time?
Straight off uniting LA at his Juneteenth concert in Inglewood, Kendrick Lamar shot a music video today in Compton.
On Tailor Made Freestyle, Drake antagonized Kendrick Lamar by claiming he needed to deliver a victory for the West Coast so he wouldn't let his heroes down. When Kendrick responded on Euphoria, he relentlessly picked apart Drake for being from Canada, clowning Toronto slang, Drake's accent changes, and claiming Drake pantomimes the kind of violence that Kendrick saw growing up in Compton.
Tell them run to America to imitate heritage. They can't imitate this violence.
In this bar, Kendrick was basically saying Toronto doesn't have the kind of hip-hop legacy that places like Compton actually gave birth to, and that Toronto artists are imitating the authenticity of American rappers. Instead of being offended by this diss, many Torontians seem to actually side with Kendrick. New Ho King, a Toronto restaurant that Kendrick name-checked on Euphoria, actually named a fried rice special after Kendrick, while the owners celebrated an uptick of visitors. That's great for business. Months after Not Like Us dropped, footage went viral of DJ Scheme, a producer from Florida, playing the song at History, a Toronto music venue owned by Drake. In the footage, you can clearly see a packed house of fans from Toronto singing along and celebrating a diss against Drake, not only in his own city, but in his own club. That's cold. It's not all fun and games in Canada, though. Rick Ross, a former...
Yeah, I could only imagine how Drake feel, man. What Lil Yachty say, that he not worried? He ain't bother him. He must not be human if he ain't bother him.
Drake ally turned enemy, was recently attacked after a concert in Vancouver where he played Not Like Us. Videos show Ross being confronted by people in the crowd who found playing the song was disrespectful. Meanwhile, artists from Top Dog Entertainment, Kendrick's former label, have received some pushback when they try and tour in Toronto. Schoolboy Q and Sir both booked sold-out shows at Drake's venue History, only to have their concerts abruptly canceled the day of. There's a lot of speculation out there that Drake made the final call to keep Kendrick's allies from being able to perform. On the other hand, Schoolboy Q blamed the Toronto police for canceling the show out of fear of the beef escalating. Compton, meanwhile, seems to be united lockstep behind Kendrick. Kendrick's pop-out concert on Juneteenth united rappers from different gang sets in a public display of support, bringing together YG, Roddy Ricch, and Dr. Dre on the same stage. The music video for Not Like Us was shot in Compton and featured thousands of Compton citizens coming out to celebrate the song's success. Murals have even popped up in the city celebrating both Kendrick Lamar and his victory over Drake, which goes to show the level of love Kendrick still gets from his community. Drake might be the most famous person to ever come out of Toronto, but his city is just not rallying behind him in the same way Compton is for Kendrick. That's a major W for Compton, especially since Toronto doesn't seem to have Drake's back anymore at all. That leads to the big question, can Drake restore his reputation and Toronto's pride in him? Because let's face it, the places where the sixth god can lay his head are definitely narrowing down. As we discussed earlier, Drake doesn't even seem to be safe in LA anymore and made a big show out of relocating to Texas. If Drake can't get his hometown to back him up, is he ever going to recover from this? I don't know. Only time will tell.
Man, them boys would have came up in there, I'm telling you, man, yo. Them gangs in LA, they on different time now, boy. They been on different time, but they on different time. They be going up in them hills too. They do not play, boy. But yeah, y'all let me know what y'all think of the video, man. I'm getting stuffy. It's early in the morning right now, but yeah, beautiful edit by Rap Lore. I will leave a link in the description. Y'all let me know what y'all think of the video. Big Kish signing out. I'm going, y'all.